This is Raider for On the Raider Entertainment Blog, coming to another edition of Movie Reviews and Observations. This is going to be number 54. Now, due to time constraints and how the weekend went, I actually started watching the movie Tenet Saturday night. Watched for like one half, almost one, more than one half of it. But it's such a long-winded science fiction, thriller, action, confusing movie that I stopped and we watched half of it, me and my father, and finished the rest of it on Sunday. So I said to myself, if I'm going to watch half of this on Sunday, I might as well use my time better and watch, maybe instead of watching that movie, I'll watch something else. So I didn't watch a movie, actually, on Sunday, besides from finishing this. And for a movie that is 2.5 hours, again, I'll keep telling you, movies don't have to be 2 hours long. They don't have to be 2.5 hours long. There was so much dead, boring talk, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, why is this woman so important? It's okay, so she's married to somebody who's very important. And I'm saying to myself, like, why does that matter? It's not as important. And it's like every actor in this movie that is British got to speak in a British accent. So the guy from Yesterday's in the movie, the guy from the TV show Deception, Robert Patterson, all speaking as, British. Michael Caine was in this movie. And there's John David Washington. He did his best to sell this movie, but again, it's just all over the place, kind of, confusing and over the top with production and everything going on. And it was just like, okay, he works for a special agency trying to stop somebody, but then there are other people who work for it and all this other stuff. And it's like, okay, cool. But like, they're trying to stop a bad guy for like ruining the world, things like that, with this whole inverse world. And you're like, okay, cool. And you're going to tell me, I didn't get it. I should go watch it again. Yeah, I'm really going to spend another 2.5 hours in one sitting or in two separate sittings to watch this movie. I watched it. It was okay. It's definitely not one of the best movies. It's also not one of the worst movies. It was just okay. Then I watched the movie Kajillionaire, and I'm like, Evan Rachel Wood has no business being in such a bad movie, nor does, Gina Rodriguez from the CW. Like, basically her parents, their whole entire life, they have, lived off the grid, doing whatever they can to make money and do whatever, and that's her thing, and she's like a grown adult. But she's always been with her family, and she can't get out of the situation, so she meets, Gina Rodriguez, and things happen, blah, 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 blah. But it's so boring, and for an hour and 47 minute movie, it felt like it dragged on for like 2 hours, instead of, the hour 47 minutes, and she did as best she could, but it's just, and even the parents, they were really good in their acting roles. Richard Jenkins was really good, but it's like, Deborah Winger, but you're like, not the best movie. I don't know how it's certified rotten fresh. It just was Then I watched this movie after a long day of doing things. For original, I was like, I'll watch the first half, then take a break, because it is about 2 hours and 10 minutes. And you're like, 15 minutes plus. You're like, okay, cool. But then you're like, oh, it's with subtitles. And you're like, okay, it's some coming age story where her parents, don't give a crap about her, abusive older sibling, although something lives somewhere else, and she's just trying her best, blah, blah, blah. She has a medical issue, nobody cares. Teacher only cares about her, blah, blah, blah. And it was interesting, and it was good acting, and sometimes foreign movies are better than American movies, and subtitles are worth it. But, again, I got the premise. I'm like, okay, cool. It could be an hour and a half, it could be an hour 40, hour 50, 2 hours. But more than 2 hours is just pushing the limit on House of Hummingbird. So if you really want to watch a 2 hour plus movie in Korean, go right ahead. I'm not going to stop you. I'm just going to warn you that it may not be worth it. Then I have a movie from my old list called The Soul Collector, and the library list says horror film. It's more got like science fiction, like voodoo and like weird fantasy elements of some guy leaving his property to his estranged son and granddaughter, but then the way that the woman describes the woman he's with is that the girl's aunt. But then it's like, is it her mother or is it stepmother? It was all weird how they did that there. And supposedly there's a guy that used to work on the property, and they're just like, oh no, I'm like, there's some people that are watching from the village, and then people from the village evil, there's a guy who used to work on the land evil. And it was just like, okay, what was the point of watching this movie, and what was the point of the movie? It's like 9-something minutes, so it's not a waste of your time. But it's kind of all over the place, with it being a drama, a fantasy movie, or a horror film. And just not great acting, and it just was, not that great. I would not have wasted my time watching that if I were you. Then I decided, you know what, time constraints, I'm going to watch The Owners, another horror film, where you think with horror films, if people are dying and they can't survive something, at least one person gets out of it. Not everybody survives, just to let you, nobody survives. It's like I was hoping that Maisie Williams, who's on the cover, gets the billing, and she's the famous person, that she would survive. And of course, no, she doesn't survive. So it's like wasting my time there. And it's nice she's branching out from Game of Thrones, but this movie is where her delinquent boyfriend steals her car, and they're casing a rich person's home with his loser friend, who then they gotta drag in that he was dating her sister, and her sister went missing, and he hangs out with her boyfriend because he's got nothing else to do, and then he hangs out with another delinquent, and the person playing her boyfriend, the delinquent, and this guy have been in other movies before, and like, okay, cool, but they go, let's go steal from this person's house. Instead of just stealing what they can, there's a safe, and they're worried about, let's wait till they come home, and their plan is to, like, you know, tie him up, get the coat out of them, but then things go awry with this old doctor and his senile wife who was his nurse. And this thing, everything goes to heck. People die. Nobody survives. And it's supposed you find out that the old person and who's a doctor and his senile wife have been doing this for years since they lost their kid. Because you see, there's all these other missing kids and things like that. And it's just like, okay. It went from horror, you know, survival movie to creepy. Just not that good. I give credit to the old people in the movie playing the old doctor and his senile wife. They were pretty good in the movie, but outside of Maisie Williams, nobody else in this movie jumps out of like, oh my god. So again, not a good movie. Then the last movie that I got a chance to watch this week was The Secrets We Keep. And like I'll say, Noomi Rapace and Chris Messina did a good job as a married couple, but she's like a gypsy from Romania. And this after World War II, and Joel Kinnaman, supposedly the Nazi that, you know, killed and beat all the Romanian women, including her sister, and she's trying to get revenge on this guy and kidnaps him, and it's a whole movie about how she has to deal with her husband because she hasn't been honest with her husband. He marries a Jewish woman, which is weird, and then doesn't tell her all this secret, and he keeps denying that he's not a German, he's from Switzerland, and all this other stuff. And it was good acting by some of the characters, but I guess it was just like taking a very sensitive topic, you know, not Jews also being freaking out, but like how the gypsies were, and how she's trying to get revenge and all this other stuff, and how it all goes down. It was an interesting idea, but it was just like, you know, dragging on for a movie that's, you know, in the hour and like 40-minute range, not that long, hour, like, you know, hour and a half-ish to 40. But again, it was just, nothing that I watched this week between The Secrets We Keep, the horror film Soul Collector, The Owner, the long 2-hour-plus Korean movie House of Hummingbird, or the drama Bajillionaire, or Tenet. They'd go, wow, nothing popped out, nothing was that amazing. Most of them are movies that most people just, you don't need to watch. Like Tenet, you watch it because it's one of those movies where everybody's talking about it. You should watch it. The rest, I would not waste your time. Thanks for listening to another edition of Movie Reviews and Observations number 54. For On the Radar Entertainment Blog, I'm Radar. See you guys next time.